The dangerous power of becoming boring. You wake up exhausted before the day even begins. Not from lack of sleep, no, from something deeper. The calendar, it's full. The notifications, they're constant. You're busy, productive, connected. And yet, somewhere underneath all that motion, a question whispers, is this what living was supposed to feel like? Most people, they silence that question immediately. They fill the gap with another task, another scroll, another distraction. But what if the exhaustion isn't your failure? What if, indeed, it's the design? The economic model of this 21st century, it doesn't run primarily on your labor anymore. Oh no, it runs on your attention, your emotional bandwidth, your reactions, your engagement, every notification, every outrage cycle, every carefully engineered cliffhanger in a streaming series, every infinite scroll, every fear-based news headline. These aren't side effects of a connected world. They're features. You're not using these platforms. You're being metabolized by them. And here's what makes this particularly sinister. They've convinced you that stimulation equals living, that a calendar full of obligations equals importance, and that hustle equals purpose. So you chase and chase and chase, and you call it ambition. Meanwhile, the architects of this system, the ones who actually built this attention economy, what do? They send their kids to tech-free schools. They retreat to analog hobbies. They practice meditation in silent rooms. They read books, paper ones, slowly. They sell you chaos and buy themselves calm. This is not conspiracy. This is confession. The same executives who design apps to maximize your screen time strictly limit their own children's access. They've said it openly. They know something you're only beginning to suspect. The stimulated mind is the captured mind. In 1845, a 27-year-old Harvard graduate walked into the woods with a borrowed axe and built a cabin 10 feet by 15 feet. One room, one door, 4 windows. His neighbors called it retreat, failure, a waste of potential. Henry David Thoreau called it something else entirely. He called it war. Not war against society, war against the machinery that turns human beings into fuel. Thoreau was the son of a pencil manufacturer, Harvard educated. He could have done anything respectable. Instead, he walked onto land owned by Ralph Waldo Emerson and built his small cabin. He planted beans, read Homer, watched ants fight on a tree stump with the intensity of someone observing actual warfare. He spent hours just sitting. To his neighbors in Concord, Massachusetts, this was failure made visible. A young man with potential, wasting his life, refusing to marry, refusing to build wealth, refusing to participate. But Thoreau wasn't running away from society. He was conducting an experiment on it. I went to the woods because I wished to live deliberately, he wrote, to front only the essential facts of life and see if I could not learn what it had to teach, and not, when I came to die, discover that I had not lived. Read that again. Not when I came to die, discover that I had not lived. This isn't about nature worship. This isn't about escaping responsibility. This is about a man who looked at the trajectory everyone expected him to follow and asked a question that still burns today. What if most of what we call living is actually a sophisticated form of dying slowly? What if busyness is just a socially acceptable way to avoid the terror of actually being present? Thoreau wasn't hiding at Walden. He was hunting for the signal underneath all the noise. And to find it, he had to subtract ruthlessly. He spent 2 years, 2 months, and 2 days in that cabin. And when he emerged, he didn't come back with peace and tranquility. He came back with a weapon. A book so quietly savage that it's been fueling revolutions ever since. Gandhi read it. Martin Luther King Jr. studied it. It influenced movements across continents and centuries. all from a man who planted beans and watched ants. Boring. Unforgivably, powerfully boring. Let's talk about what's actually happening in your brain right now, shall we? When you receive a notification, doesn't matter what kind, your prefrontal cortex, it just lights right up. Dopamine surges. The reward pathway, it activates. This is the same circuitry involved in gambling, in substance abuse, in any compulsive behavior. The engineers, they know this. They've testified about it. They've written books confessing it. But here's the twist no one discusses. Not really. It's not the pleasure that hooks you. It's the unpredictability. Slot machines don't addict people because they pay out. They addict people because sometimes they pay out. That intermittent reinforcement schedule, it's the most powerful behavioral conditioning tool known to psychology. Your phone, it's a slot machine you check 96 times a day. And every check, whether it delivers something or nothing, strengthens the loop. Now apply this to your entire life. Social media, intermittent validation. News cycles, intermittent fear and relief. Relationships mediated through apps, intermittent connection. Work emails arriving at all hours, intermittent urgency. Your nervous system is being played like an instrument, you see, and the song it's learning is dependency. When everything's exciting, nothing is. When everything's urgent, nothing actually matters. When you're always stimulated, you lose the capacity to generate your own motivation. You become a reactor, not an actor. And reactors are easy to predict, easy to manipulate, easy to harvest. There's a historical parallel that might reshape how you see this. In ancient China, there was a philosopher named Lao Tzu, the founder of Taoism. He wrote a text called the Tao Te Ching, 81 short passages. You can read the whole thing in an hour. One passage describes the usefulness of a bowl. What makes a bowl useful, Lao Tzu asks. Not the clay, the emptiness inside, the hollow space. That's where the function lives. He applies this to rooms, to wheels, to life itself. Usefulness arises from what is not there. Thoreau understood this instinctively. His entire project was subtraction. Strip away everything inessential until only the essential remains. Then examine it, then live from it. But here's what most people miss. This ain't minimalism as aesthetic preference. This ain't the cluttering for Instagram. This ain't asking if your socks spark joy. This is strategic emptiness. When your life is full of obligations, of stimulation, of noise, you have no capacity for what actually matters. You're so busy responding that you never initiate. So busy consuming that you never create. So busy performing productivity that you never actually produce anything that will outlast you. The full calendar is a trap. The busy schedule is a prison you build yourself. And the cruel joke is that society applauds you for it. She's so busy, she must be successful. He never stops working, he must be important. No, busy is often just a way to hide from the terrifying question, what would I do if I had nothing to react to? Most people don't know. And that not knowing frightens them so deeply that they'll fill every moment to avoid it. Thoreau sat with that question for 2 years. What he found there changed the world. Here's a concept you've never been taught. Boredom tolerance is a skill. And it might be the most important skill you can develop. In the 1970s, psychologist Walter Mischel conducted the famous marshmallow test. Children were given a choice, 1 marshmallow now, or 2 if they waited 15 minutes. The kids who waited, who tolerated the discomfort of delay, went on to have better life outcomes across nearly every metric. Academic success, physical health, relationship stability, financial security.
For decades, this was interpreted as a study about self-control. But, recent research suggests something deeper. The children who waited weren't just exercising willpower. No, they had developed strategies to refrain the boredom. They sang songs. They told themselves stories. They made the waiting itself interesting. They didn't just resist the marshmallow. They transformed their relationship to time. This is what Thoreau did at Walden. He didn't suffer through the monotony of rural isolation. he rebuilt his capacity to perceive. He retrained his attention until a single morning, watching ice melt on the pond, became more vivid, more meaningful than years of social busywork had ever been. "To be awake is to be alive," he wrote. "I have never yet met a man who was quite awake." That line is an indictment. He's not talking about sleep. He's talking about the chronic distraction that passes for consciousness in most people's lives. You think you're awake, you're just stimulated. These are not the same. Think about your attention as a finite resource, because it is. You wake up with a certain amount of cognitive capacity, a certain amount of emotional bandwidth, a certain number of quality decisions you can make before your judgment degrades. This is scientifically established. Decision fatigue, ego depletion, the tank is real, and, well, it empties. Now, here's the question. Who is spending your tank? When you check the news first thing in the morning, you're spending. When you engage with outrage on social media, you're spending. When you say yes to an obligation you don't actually want, you're spending. When you let someone else's emergency become your priority, you're spending. By noon, most people are bankrupt, running on fumes, making poor choices because the quality fuel is gone. And what do they have to show for it? Nothing they chose, nothing they built, nothing they will remember in a year. Just a series of reactions to other people's agendas. Thoreau's boring life was economically brilliant. He spent almost nothing. Not money, attention. He protected his cognitive resources like a miser protects gold. No social obligations. Wow. No news of distant wars. No fashion trends. No gossip. No manufactured urgencies. Just the essential facts of life. Stacked, examined, understood. And from that protected wealth, he produced work that still pays dividends nearly 2 centuries later. Here's what the system cannot tolerate: someone who doesn't want more. Think about it. The entire machinery of modern capitalism depends on manufactured dissatisfaction. You must feel that what you have is not enough, that who you are is not enough, that where you are is not enough. Otherwise, why would you buy? Why would you scroll? Why would you chase? Contentment is an act of sabotage. Not passive contentment, not giving up. Strategic contentment. The kind where you look at the frantic masses sprinting toward mirages and you simply don't. You plant your beans, you read your books, you think your thoughts, and the system cannot touch you because you've exited the game they need you to play. This is what made Thoreau dangerous. Not his eloquence, not his education. He refused to be impressed, refused to be hurried, refused to believe that his worth was determined by his productivity or his possessions. In Civil Disobedience, his other famous essay, he wrote, "The mass of men lead lives of quiet desperation." But notice, he didn't say they were forced into it. They lead those lives. Active verb. They choose it daily, by default. The desperation isn't imposed from outside. It's an inside job. There's a modern pathology Thoreau never saw, but somehow diagnosed in advance. It's called the paradox of choice. Too many options paralyze rather than liberate. But I want to go darker than that. Options aren't just paralyzing. They're expensive, and not in ways you're calculating. Every option you keep open costs mental real estate. Every possibility you refuse to close burns background processing power. Every maybe later, or I'll keep my options open, is a tiny leak in your cognitive fuel tank. Rich people understand this instinctively. That's why many of them wear the same outfit every day. Eliminate the small decisions. Preserve the resources for the ones that matter. But they've only figured out half the equation. The truly wise, the Thoreaus of any age, go further. They don't just eliminate small decisions. They eliminate entire categories of life that don't serve their core purpose. At Walden, Thoreau didn't just simplify his wardrobe. He simplified his existence. He asked, What are the essential facts of life? And then he cut everything else. Not later, not gradually, immediately. One room, beans and rice, a few books, silence, depth. He didn't keep options open. He burned them deliberately. Because he understood something our culture refuses to admit. Optionality. It's a form of cowardice dressed as wisdom. When you keep all doors open, you walk through none. You stand in the hallway forever, congratulating yourself on your flexibility, while life, real life, happens in the rooms. Here's a story that reveals the depth of Thoreau's commitment. In 1846, 1 year into his Walden experiment, Thoreau was walking to town to pick up a repaired shoe. On the way, he was stopped by the local tax collector, Sam Staples. Thoreau owed 6 years of back poll taxes, about $1.50, barely anything. Staples asked him to pay. Thoreau refused, not because he couldn't afford it, not because he'd forgotten, because the taxes funded a government that sanctioned slavery and was waging what Thoreau considered an unjust war against Mexico. He would not participate, not even indirectly, not even symbolically. Staples, who actually liked Thoreau, offered to pay the tax himself just to avoid the paperwork. Thoreau refused that too, so they arrested him, locked him in the town jail. He spent one night there. Someone, probably his aunt, though he never confirmed it, paid the tax against his wishes. He was released the next morning, retrieved his shoe, and walked back to the pond. But that single night in jail produced civil disobedience, an essay that would later inspire Gandhi's Salt March, Martin Luther King's Montgomery bus boycott, the anti-apartheid movement in South Africa. All because a man refused to bend over $1.50. This is not the behavior of someone hiding from life. This is not passive withdrawal. This is a man so clear about his principles that he made himself ungovernable, not through violence, not through wealth, not through influence, through refusal. And refusal, true refusal, is only possible when you've eliminated everything inessential from your life, when there's nothing they can threaten to take away, when your needs are so small that their leverage disappears. Thoreau recorded his expenses meticulously, every cent. He knew exactly what his cabin cost, what his food cost, what his simple life required, and the number was almost comically low. He proved mathematically that a human being could meet all their actual needs with a tiny fraction of what most people spent. The rest was anxiety, dressed as necessity, status, dressed as requirement, fear, dressed as ambition. The cost of a thing, he wrote, is the amount of what I will call life, which is required to be exchanged for it, immediately or in the long run. Read that again. Let it sink in. He's not measuring price in dollars. He's measuring it in life. That house you're working 60 hours a week to afford, what's the real cost? How many years of your one existence are you exchanging for those extra square feet? That promotion you're chasing, what's it actually buying you? More responsibility, less time, higher stakes, more stress. You're not getting ahead, you're getting more entangled. Thoreau's question cuts through every justification. Is what you're gaining worth the life you're spending? Most people never ask because they're afraid of the answer. Here's a neurological reality that has profound implications. Your brain has two primary modes, the focused mode and the default mode. Focused mode is what you think of as thinking, active attention, problem solving, learning. Default mode is what happens when you're not focused on anything specific, daydreaming, mind wandering, staring out windows. Modern productivity culture worships focused mode. Every minute must be optimized. Every gap must be filled. Podcast in the car, audiobook on the walk, Twitter while waiting in line. But here's what the research shows. Your most creative insights come from default mode. When your mind wanders, your brain starts connecting disparate ideas, synthesizing, making leaps that focused attention cannot. Every major creative breakthrough in history was preceded by periods of apparent doing nothing. Newton under the apple tree, Archimedes in the bath, Darwin on long walks, Einstein on his bicycle. Boredom isn't the absence of productivity. It's the precondition for deep productivity. When Thoreau sat for hours watching the pond, he wasn't wasting time. He was creating the mental space where Walden could emerge. where civil disobedience could crystallize. His boring life produced more lasting value than 1,000 busy executives who couldn't sit still for 10 minutes. As a psychological phenomenon called hedonic adaptation, whatever level of stimulation you become accustomed to becomes your new baseline. The exciting becomes normal. The extraordinary becomes ordinary. This is why lottery winners return to their baseline happiness within a year. Why the new car thrill fades. Why the dream house becomes just a house. But here's the dark side no one discusses. The treadmill goes both ways. If you continuously escalate stimulation, more drama, more intensity, more excitement, you, require more stimulation to feel anything at all. You're not becoming more alive, you're becoming more numb. Raising the threshold until only extreme experiences register. This is why thrill seekers need bigger thrills, why social media users need more outrageous content, why people in chaos become addicted to chaos, even when they say they want peace. They've conditioned themselves to require catastrophe to feel. Thoreau, well, he ran the experiment in reverse. By radically reducing stimulation, he lowered his hedonic baseline. He resensitized himself until a sunrise became miraculous, until the sound of ice cracking on the pond became symphonic, until ordinary existence became vivid. He didn't escape life, he intensified it by subtracting the noise. And here's what bothers me about how Thoreau is usually presented. They make him a nature poet, a gentle eccentric, a man who liked trees. They domesticate him, neuter him, turn him into a greeting card. But Thoreau was a radical. Not in the political sense we use today, but in the original Latin sense, radix, root. He went to the root of things, and, well, what he found there was uncomfortable. He found that most of what we call society is a conspiracy of distraction, that most of what we call success is a more sophisticated form of slavery, that most of what we call life is a rehearsal that never becomes a performance. If a man does not keep pace with his companions, he wrote, perhaps it is because he hears a different drummer. Let him step to the music which he hears, however measured or far away. This is not permission to be weird. This is a diagnosis. If you're out of step, maybe you're not broken. Maybe you're the only one hearing the actual music underneath the noise everyone else is marching to. So, where does this leave you? I'm not going to insult you with a 3-step action plan. Thoreau's lesson can't be reduced to a bullet point list, but I will ask you to sit with the question. Actually, sit with it, not for a moment, for days if necessary. What would remain if you subtracted everything from your life that was there out of habit, fear, or imitation? Not what you think should remain, not what would look good to others, not what your parents or culture or social circle expect. What, would actually remain if you stripped away every single thing you do because you're supposed to? That core, whatever survives the subtraction, that's where your real life is hiding. Most people never find it because the noise is too comfortable, the distraction too convenient, the busyness too praised. They die in the hallway, never having entered a room. Thoreau entered. For 2 years, 2 months, and 2 days, he lived in his chosen room. And what he found there is still sending ripples through time. There's a military concept called strategic retreat. It's when an army intentionally withdraws, not in defeat, but in cunning. They pull back to stronger ground. They consolidate resources. They let the enemy overextend, exhaust themselves chasing phantoms. And then from that protected position, they strike with concentrated force. Thoreau's boring life was a strategic retreat. He withdrew from the battlefield that society had chosen. He refused to fight on their terms, for their prizes, according to their rules. He consolidated, simplified, strengthened. And from that protected position, that cabin in the woods, he launched an assault on the entire machinery of unconscious living. We're still feeling the impact. A boring life isn't a failure of ambition. It's ambition refined to its purest form. Not ambition for more, but ambition for depth, for meaning, for a life that's actually yours. Here's the uncomfortable truth I've been circling. You already know this. Some part of you, the part that started reading this, that's still here after all these words, that part knows. You felt the exhaustion of the treadmill, the emptiness of the full calendar. The strange hunger that can't be satisfied by anything the world keeps offering. That knowing is your compass. But knowing and doing are different countries, and most people live and die in the gap between them. Thoreau crossed. Not because he was special, not because he was braver or smarter or more enlightened. He crossed because he was honest enough to admit what he saw and stubborn enough to act on it. The question is, will you? The simple life isn't simple because it's easy. It's simple because you've cut away everything that doesn't matter until only what matters remains. That cutting takes courage, clarity, a willingness to be misunderstood, to be called boring by people running in circles, to be called a failure by people who've never asked what success actually means, to step to the music you hear, however faint, however far away, however much it terrifies you. Thoreau, he proved something that still threatens every system built on extraction and distraction. You can opt out, not by running away, not by checking out, but by becoming so clear about what matters that everything else loses its grip on you. When your needs are small, you cannot be controlled by promises of more. When your attention is protected, you cannot be harvested by manufactured urgency. When your life is deliberately chosen, rather than defaulted into, you become dangerous to every system that depends on your unconsciousness. This is the power of the boring life. Not boring as in lifeless, boring as in ungovernable, unpredictable by their metrics, invisible to their algorithms, useless to their extraction machines. They can't sell to someone who doesn't want. They can't control someone who doesn't react. They can't manipulate someone whose nervous system isn't perpetually on fire. And that terrifies them. Because if enough people realize what Thoreau realized, that most of what we're chasing is a mirage, that the exhaustion is the point, that there's another way entirely, well, the whole game collapses. The cabin at Walden Pond was demolished long ago, but the question Thoreau planted there keeps growing. What if you stopped? What if you subtracted? What if you became boring? Not as retreat, as war. The world will keep rewarding the loud, the busy, the perpetually stimulated. Your life is happening now, not later, when you've achieved enough, accumulated enough, impressed enough people. Now. The only question is whether you're living it or letting it be spent for you. Thoreau, he answered that question in a cabin, 10 feet by 15 feet. One room, one door, 4 windows. What will your answer be?